Okay. I see no one is in observing, but that's fine. I've set it up to record, so if they don't drop in, they'll have some sample of a classroom. So what I'm getting at is I made it so huge, it's hard to find. I want to change the font again. And lost the mouse. There it is. Okay, that's no problem. We'll still here. So, well, that's kind of cool too. You see, there are all kinds of ways you can export this. You can copy it to your clipboard. So if you wanted to keep all the italics and everything the way it was, it's ready to go into the document later. But compared to the big font, to the sorry, I gotta. Well, we can see. Okay. Do you see any serifs on these fonts here? Notice how smooth this is. This is a sans serif font, which is easier to read on screen. Maybe not so easy to print out on paper, right? But you see, there's nothing coming off this letter U with the left. Can you see that? Okay, that's all. See. So when it comes to your style, you've got to think of your audience. How are they going to read it? Okay? The reality is, for this class, I may read it on paper. I may read it on print. And I'm just giving you some suggestions about this for you to think about from here on out. So when you compose something, maybe if it's designed to be on a screen, say a PowerPoint presentation, maybe you just don't deal with the serif fonts, for example. Right? So, any questions about MLA versus APA? So let's get into structuring our argument. There is another Purdue website that's really cool. Excelsior. Okay, still affiliated with the online writing lab with Purdue, but I think takes us to where we really kind of want to go with the writing, not just dealing with the minutia of how to format the reference. As important as that is, the more important thing is getting our ideas to connect with our readers. So here, under argument and critical thinking, right? We have argument and critical thinking and organizing your argument, okay? And we see that there are different types of argument. We talk about the toolmean and the Aristotelian. Now, I've talked to you a bit about the toolmean before, and it's the one where basically we are going to make a claim and we are going to substantiate why. But I think an easier way to look at this is to just get back to BC times, right? When ordinary citizens needed to get up and defend an idea. Right? So how did they do it? Did they write it down? What did we talk about on Monday?
Speech.
Yeah, they typically would have to speak, right? And speak in front of an assembly, which could be a very large, well, meeting or small, but most likely an assembly. So here was the basics, right? Expand this a little bit, and then we'll look at an infographic. I just want you to compare this structure of classical argument to the structures that you've been building so far. And it's kind of interesting to me because there happen to be 5 of them, right? Yes, in theory, you could make this a 5-paragraph essay, right? But I think in practice, you may not be able to do it in 5 paragraphs because of what's needed to achieve each purpose, right? So let me get a different colored pen here. Green, I think. We'll go with green. So for your argumentative essay, I want you to try the Aristotelian argument structure. 1, it's simple. 2, it's older than old school, right? Get the job done. And it will certainly prepare us for looking at different other ways of arguing next week. So, Aristotelian argument structure. Okay. 1, introduce your issue. Have you done that before? Have you introduced your issues before? Yes, you have, okay? So, this is nothing new, but it's actually omitted quite often in civic discourse. I don't know, when you listen to arguments, how many times people just start arguing and we don't even know what the issue is. It's not introduced. So you introduce your issue, right? And here, the idea is to present your readers with your main point and then dig into it, right? Remember we talked about the thesis statement, right? What is a thesis? It's your main point, right? That's all it is. And your expository essay, it was probably not an argument, right? But you were probably trying to do some persuasion in there, right? But you had a main point, right? Not picking on you, but every time I brush my teeth, I think of your paper, right? I think your main point might be just to have the reader become aware, right? Nothing wrong with that, but there's a point there, right? And that will drive your purpose and how you structure your paper, right? So you got a thesis there, right? And you're going to dig into it, right? 2, present your case. Okay? By explaining the issue in detail, right? So present your case. Explain issue in detail. Okay, so what's really going on here? Okay? I've seen some of your introductions. You're throwing in the topic and why the reader should give a darn about it, right? In other words, you're trying to hook them and engage them, and that's good. But that hooking and engagement is probably not a detailed explanation of the issue, right? It gets them interested in the topic. It helps you introduce your issue, right? But ultimately, you're going to need to explain it in detail. And of course, you can do that. Why? Because it's asking for exposition. right? Whole reason we started practicing with exposition is because you need to have some exposition in a well-crafted argument, right? So when you explain your issue in detail, right? And explain why something must be done or why something's not working, right? So you need to then connect to your thesis, right? Why? You're only explaining this issue in detail, right? I'm going to say introduce your issue, right? The thesis is implied in there, but your issue is in there. And of course, we'll bury the thesis statement in there. But what we're expecting now is you're going to present your case, right? It's like a lawyer, right? You ever seen My Cousin Vinny? Remember that movie, My Cousin Vinny? About the Utes. This guy's helping defend his cousins from foreign. Anyway, bring out your drawings and your explanation. You're trying to present your case here, right? But wait a minute, you're not done, right? Can you just rest your case after you present it? Why not? Because someone else could shoot you down or might be able to shoot you down, right? So this is why in an argumentative essay, whether it's Aristotelian or anything else, it's always required to introduce the counter argument, right? Address the opposition. And this is actually kind of the fun part. I mean, this is where, I don't know. It's just a bit of like, I don't know, I think of Eminem and 8 Mile, the battles, right? We're battling with words here, right? So you explain the issue, you've already kind of set yourself up as somewhat of an expert on the issue, right? And you may have already brought some information that's going to help you with this next part, right? So you address the opposition. Of course, you want to shut them down, right? So you can draw on stuff you've mentioned before, right? You presented all this information in detail. This is why this is not likely to be a single paragraph, right? Because when you present your issue in detail, you're probably going to expand on it. You address the opposition, right? In other words, here it says, use a few paragraphs to explain the other side and refute the opposition one point at a time. So that means need to carefully think. The opposition is likely to have, say, 3 strong arguments or 4 strong arguments. You need to think about what those are and address them one by one and refute them. You know what refuting means? Shoot them down. Line them up. Shoot them down, right? So this is good because the other side hasn't been able to say a thing, right? But you just tear them up, right? So then, what's 4? After you address the other side, you'll want to provide clear evidence that your side is the best side. So now you're going to provide the proofs, right? Provide your proofs. Huh? So here you're presenting your case. You're not really proving it. It's sort of like you're throwing in a lot of stuff. Let's just call it a preponderance of evidence. You've thrown in a lot of stuff when you've explained the issue, but you haven't really analyzed it, torn it apart, right? Because you need to have analyzed the opposition first, right? And here, now you can bring in your proofs. You can bring in all your data, all the BS from the other side's point of view, right? And now you can prove it. Right? And this is where Aristotle would have said your proofs can either be ethos, logos, or pathos, right? Why do you think Aristotle would have said you could use any of these three? Why? Why can we choose between ethos, logos, or pathos in our proofs? And why am I telling you to try to downplay ethos and pathos for this assignment? What do you think that is?
Because it's an argument in trying to be as factual as possible.
Why are we trying to be as factual as possible?
Not to offend the opposition.
Okay. Well, let's think about it. We have society and we have academia. Okay? Huh? Two different yet kind of overlapping worlds. Right? And in society, right, we are looking for the best available means of persuasion for any situation, correct? Keep in mind, all rhetoric is, I'm going to put it in green here in the middle, is skill of, the skill of choosing the best means of persuasion for particular situation. Which means thinking about your audience all over again, right? Okay. So in social discourse, it's like gloves off. We're trying to persuade people, right? Ethos, logos, or pathos, we want to get it done. But in academia, there's an expectation that we're going to be logical and factual. Or at least on the surface there is. Admittedly, it's not complete, but it is there. So in academia, in society, hey, ethos, pathos, logos, these can all be used to persuade. Think of proofs as getting the other side to say yes, okay? Pretty much it, right? This is academia values logos more. Not to say you won't find other types of appeal in academic text. Follow me so far? Okay, so it's very important to understand persuasion, right? And how it goes beyond logic, right? And how it's a very powerful force in this world, right? And we will definitely be coming back to this quite a bit in our particularly in our next class, right? So this is why providing the proofs in the Aristotelian style, let's say, just prove it. Use one of the classic methods of appeal and then present your conclusion, right? So you remind your readers of your main point, your thesis, and you summarize. And if you're arguing for some kind of change, this is a good place to give your audience a call to action. Tell them what they could do to make a change. Okay? So 5, present your conclusion. And notice some of the same things that I and others have been teaching you about writing are the same, right? In that conclusion, we want to remind of main point, right? We want to summarize. And then we want to connect to to a final thought of some sort. Could be a suggestion, anything. Now, that's pretty much it. Huh? Any questions about that? I have a copy of that. Copy of that. Okay. So, the toughest thing for many is addressing the opposition, right? Once you've gone through this stuff and start addressing the opposition anytime you argue, you'll find it will actually make you a better arguer in many situations. If we don't listen to the other side, all we're doing is just telling people to shut up, right? And that's not productive. So here in the Excel here, there are some other things that are going to help you too. So I'm going to give you a sample here to give an argument with the infographic too. So that's kind of not the successful argument. Okay. Yeah, this is a good citing sources, right? As you dig into the opposition's point of view, you're going to find more sources, right? So you can go back to your reference list, and most likely you're going to use some of the same references you used earlier, because you're using some of the same expository information, right? And now you know from looking at the differences between APA and MLA, you know you've got to fine tune that, right? So, but you're going to be adding more sources and opposing views. This, I think, is probably the most important thing about argument, is when we argue, there are two sides, and we need to somehow validate that other person's side and discuss it. Right? At the same time, though, we are supporting our thesis. That needs to be clear, right? So I think of stage 4. Now let's look at this. So when we address the opposition, I think we're going to want to cite sources here. I'm putting this on the side. Cite sources are probably going to be happening here, and may be happening as you present your case or introduce your issue, because your expository essays already use some sources, right? So you're probably be citing sources from these second and third areas of your essay. But I'm guessing that in the 4th and 5th sections, you no longer need to be citing, right? Because this is where your own thinking is coming out. So the section 4 is where you're going to add this clarity, right? Clear thesis. Add your thesis should start really becoming clear at this point. It should be introduced here, right? We should know it's coming up, but it's really going to become clear by this fourth section. That's when your argument becomes real clear, right? And let's see, yeah, these are the opposing views right here, right? And everything here is going to support the thesis, right? So notice they're using the metaphor of the road, and just remember doing all this stuff along the way, huh? And know your audience. So in this case, your audience is not general society who can be persuaded by emotion and ethics and many other appeals, but your audience is, you know, this academic world that you're preparing for, right? Where the value is for facts and logic, or at least the stated value is. Let's see, we're human beings, so you know, the ethos equals credibility. I wanted to add that there. I've been associated with ethics, but credibility is part of that too. Right. I mean, you see this when people try to shoot each other down, right? Absolutely. I mean, metaphorically should have done it down, right? So, let me show you sample. And what this is, we're going to look at a research paper with some comments on it. And how much we can blow it up a little bit. This is just an example paper. So from the title, Time for a Change, Legalizing Marijuana in the State of Texas. What do you think this paper's main point will be? Okay, well, it's going to be, do you think, how is legalizing marijuana in the state of Texas a point? Okay? So is his point to explain? What do you think the main point of this particular essay would be, based on just the title?
Financial benefits of legalizing marijuana. So
maybe financial benefits? So you think you're talking benefits, you're talking positivity, right? Does anyone think this will be a negative article? Yeah, so your sense is it's going to be kind of positive, showing some benefits of legalizing marijuana in a single state, right? Okay. So good. Try to do this with any new reading you have. You know, just a little bit. Think about the title, what it might. Then, as you read and look through, you can see if your predictions were correct. Most likely they are, but that's one tool to kind of help you stay engaged in the paper. Okay? Obviously, this topic is more of interest to young people than most, but sometimes you're going to look at a topic that's not so interesting. Right? So here you see this is a student paper. Right? Sample student paper. Okay. So look at the title. And then there's the introduction. He's introducing the issue first. Okay? And notice that in introducing the issue, he used a citation according to Henry Anslinger, Bureau of Narcotics, right? And we'll see what the comments here teacher put in. Okay, so yeah, what this is an example of using pathos to start making this point, right? So, according to Harry J. Anslinger of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in the 1930s, most marijuana smokers are Negroes, Hispanics, jazz musicians, and entertainers. You ever heard that expression before? So there was, this attitude. Their satanic music is driven by marijuana, and marijuana smoking by white women makes them want to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and others. Comments like this and the apparent hysteria over the 1936 film Reefer Madness, which depicted marijuana turning normal teenagers into juvenile delinquents, indicate that reason and logic were not always involved in the decision to make marijuana illegal and classify it as a level 1 narcotic like heroin. Instead, stereotypes, racism, and fear often influenced our country's decision making. Why was that included in there? What's that telling us about persuasion? What is that one student uncovered about persuasion? Does he mention ethos, logos, or pathos in that passage? Look at it closely. Comments like this indicate that reason and logic were not always involved in the decision. What does that mean? What does it mean? Why was marijuana made illegal in the 30s? Someone tell me. I want to hear it from you. It's right there. It's right there in this highlighted text. Right? What did our grandparents, what did our ancestors do in the 30s, right? That has to do with what you're studying right now. Yeah, but why did that racism come about? According to the student's perspective, right? It came about because reason and logic weren't in the decision, right? Means back in the 30s, right? Legislators, right? People on the news, they were persuading each other using pathos and ethos and different things. Oh, you're no good. You smoke weed. You must be black. You must be a musician. You must be nobody, right? Nothing to do with logic, right? Nothing to do with logic. And of course, decades later, we still try to clean up the mess. I think we've come a long way as a society, but here's a good example of how depending on non-logical argument gets society in trouble. Right? So an emotional issue of the 30s, and this is why we had problems, right? So the irony here, though, is that the author himself is using pathos, getting us to kind of look in and see, wow, that was pretty messed up, right? Is this what people really thought? And the truth is, yeah, that's what people really thought. I mean, I remember when my grandfather was alive talking, people had these ideas, right? So he's introduced the issue, but used some pathos to kind of get us interested in the issue. You see how that happens? Yeah. It's not wrong, but he's not yet making the argument in this essay. He's just introducing the issue, right? So we can still throw a little persuasion into our introductions. And it may not be logical, but it's there. Right? Yeah. So here we have a presentation of the case, of this author's case, right? And you see, now he's just presenting it. Although it is important to note that there is no such thing as a completely safe drug, marijuana does seem to be one of the safest mind-altering drugs available to humans, and recent research. So it shows recent research showing the benefits, right? Benefits. You got that right. We inferred that from the title that this would be kind of a positive. What are the benefits of marijuana, right? So we're presenting our case, and now we're getting into details, right? Polls with specific information and so forth. Now, see what the comments here. It would have been nice to insert references to those polls, but that's not the main point of this, right? Main point is that the student is keeping to the structure. He's explaining his position. Notice that he acknowledges that there's another position, right? He doesn't analyze it just yet. Look at that, see? Although it is important to note that there is no such thing as a completely safe drug. Why do you think that's mentioned? Why do you
identify opposition stating that there's no completely safe drug?
Exactly. So that's probably one of the things the opposition is going to say. And I'm just going to predict now that when he addresses the opposition, he'll probably address that very issue. But notice in presenting your own case, you simply have to acknowledge that, yeah, there's another side. You don't even have to say it, because, yeah, there's another side, but we'll get to it later. We don't have to say, but we'll get to it later, because we're following a classical argument structure where we kind of know that's going to come in, right? So we acknowledge that there is an opposition. We're not going to tear them down just yet, right? So we have some foreshadowing here, right? Okay. And comments here. Okay, now we're getting to a transition, okay? So he's going to transition. While it is important to keep the dangers, okay, any drug in mind, it's time for a change. Due to a greater understanding of marijuana and its effects, American sentiment about the legalization of marijuana seems to be changing, and with good reason. With careful regulation, marijuana should be a legal drug in the state of Texas. Okay? Presented your thesis, right? We kind of come back. We mentioned the thesis back in the introduction, and now we're kind of finishing. We presented our case, right? And now we're going to transition here. One of the strongest arguments for the legalization of marijuana is the fact that alcohol and other mind-altering drugs is legal. Okay, so here he's not quite ending the presentation of the case. He is connecting to the thesis, but he's going to throw in one strong argument here, right? And throw in data. You see a poll in Texas, and you see also that it is cited. Okay? So when we look at the end of this paper, we're going to look for this author, Marijuana Policy Project, 2014. You should find it right there. Right? So here we have data. And whenever you bring in data, you need to cite your source. That's all. Right? Okay. And he's going to bring in the money argument. So he's put in like 3 good arguments for it. Okay? He's put in several paragraphs. These are all 4. Here we get to a transition. On page 4, while these are strong arguments for the legalization of marijuana, some may wonder what a plan to legalize marijuana might look like. So here, I think they're trying to assuage the fears and insecurities of the opposition and show how it could actually work out just fine, solve all these problems, right? And here he actually says, of course, there's no such thing as a safe drug. Do you remember when he mentioned that before? So now he's going to get into the details and actually basically give the opposition the floor, give them a chance to explain their case without distorting their case, right, to be fair. Okay? Then you get back to your proofs. Author reminds his audience of his thesis statement, right? Legalize marijuana. So every now and then you just remind what your main point is. Before we leave, I'm going to go all the way to the references and show you. Okay? See that? Marijuana Policy Project, the author, the date. Okay? So this is the APA style, author date, and everything cited is in there. Any questions? You can find this at Excelsior, Purdue, and if you just stick to this basic structure, I think you get it. Stick to this basic structure, the Aristotelian classical. All right. So we should be moving on to the argument. If you're still finishing up your expository, just stay in contact with me on email. I'm happy to see your work at any stage of development. Give you feedback, okay? Help you make it good. All right. Remember, the main point is to connect to our critical thinking, which wants us to be a little more busy when we have that. All right? So we'll see you next week. All right. Have a great day. I don't know if anyone showed up, but there we have it.